Boise, Idaho winter that year was so cold that every breath turned to white frost. The Whitman house glittered like a small castle on a street draped in Christmas lights. A tree over 3 meters tall was covered in red glass baubles. Golden candlelight shimmered across the window panes. Laughter and the clink of glasses echoed through the air. On the porch, snow piled up to the ankles. A figure huddled there, trembling like a dry branch in the wind. Hana Parker, the daughter who had once been radiant on her wedding day, now lay curled up in a thin coat, lips purple and cold. The wooden door was shut tight, leaving her out in the freezing night. Suddenly the door flew open. Linda Parker, 67 years old. Small but sturdy, her face weathered by years of training, martial arts student stepped straight inside. Her gaze swept across the brightly lit living room. Evelyn Whitman, mother-in-law, raised a glass of wine. Harold Whitman, father-in-law, a former judge, told a joke, and Ryan, Hana's husband, lounged in a chair, laughing heartily. Linda cradled Hana in her arms. Her daughter's breathing was faint. The whole room suddenly fell silent. "Open the door." She almost died. The 6 words rang out cold and sharp as a blade. Evelyn arched an eyebrow, the sneer still on her lips. Harold tapped his glass lightly on the table to steady the air. Ryan stood about to explain, but Linda's eyes stopped him. A mother needed no more words. One look was enough to force the entire room into silence. No one dared interfere. Linda carried her daughter down the bright hallway, leaving behind a wealthy family sitting petrified, as if their hypocrisy had just been stripped bare. Linda's small apartment was only a few blocks away. She laid Hana on the bed and, hands shaking, pulled the blanket up. That frail body was skin and bone. Her eyes were shut tight. Linda gripped her daughter's hand as anger mixed with guilt surged within her. For years, she had thrown herself into the dojo teaching students how to stand firm and counterattack, never realizing her own child had collapsed inside her marriage. Outside, Christmas fireworks lit up the night sky. In the small room, there was only Hana's faint breathing and Linda's whisper, "You're not alone anymore. I promise this time I will fight for you." Linda knew full well this battle would not be fought on a mat, but in a courtroom in the court of public opinion and in every judgmental stare. And she, the mother who seemed old and worn, would turn her daughter's pain into a flame against the powerful Whitman family. That Christmas Eve, instead of a reunion, became the beginning of a deliverance. If you have ever witnessed or experienced a loved one being hurt in their own home, do not stay silent. Silence only feeds abusers. Spread and reach out so that justice will live in law books and every household one day. The next morning, pale sunlight slipped through the thin curtains of Linda's old apartment. Hana stirred on the bed. Her tangled blonde hair clung to her sweat-damp forehead. Linda set a warm mug of cocoa beside her, then sat down, her calloused hand closing around her daughter's thin fingers. "Hana, can you hear me?" Linda whispered. Hana's eyelids fluttered, then slowly opened. Those blue-gray eyes that once sparkled now held only exhaustion and ruin. She parted her lips, her voice hoarse. "I'm sorry, Mom." Linda choked up. Her heart clenched at the sight of the girl who used to laugh so freely in the schoolyard, now just a broken shadow. She leaned down and murmured, "Don't apologize, Hana. You have nothing to apologize for." But Hana burst into tears, the tracks running through her tangled hair. Her voice shook like shattered pieces. "I lost 4 times, Mom. 4 babies who never made it to this world. Every time the bleeding started, I would curl up on the bathroom floor, biting a towel so no one would hear me scream." Ryan stood outside the door, but he never came in. "And Evelyn..." She only shook her head and said I was a disgrace to their family. Linda froze. Her breath stopped in her chest. Her fingers clutched Hana's hand until they trembled. Each word Hana spoke was a blade slicing through her heart. "I thought I was weak, not like other women. I thought it was my fault. So I kept quiet, letting them despise me and leave me on that cold porch." Linda embraced her, her chest tight and her eyes blurred. For years she had traveled everywhere, training students and believing herself a model of resilience. But inside her daughter's home, silent battles had taken away faith and life itself, and she had known nothing. "My daughter, you are not weak. They are cruel. Linda said you've endured too much on your own, voice, thick with tears holding those thin shoulders tight. Hana buried her face in her mother's chest, letting the tears flow. For the first time in years, she dared to cry out loud to let someone hear her pain. Outside, snow still fell in white sheets, but in the small room the warmth of a mother's arms slowly drove away the cold that had built up in Hana's heart for many years. Linda stood and went to the small wooden desk when the sobs subsided. She opened a drawer and took out a stack of old papers, remittance slips, letters, the support she had sent Hana over many years. Linda spread them out, eyes bright, voice firm. Listen to me. These aren't just numbers. They're proof I've always been by your side. They want to call you a freeloader to humiliate you, but these papers will expose them. We won't let the truth be buried. Hana looked at the stack of documents, then up at her mother. Her eyes were still wet, but a slight glint appeared. Her lips trembled as if she wanted to speak, but didn't yet have the courage. Linda retook her hand. You don't have to carry this alone. I will fight not in the dojo this time, but in real life. And I won't give up. In that moment, Hana cried again, but these were no longer silent tears. They were the cries of a child finally held after years of being abandoned. Linda gently smoothed her hair and looked at the faint light filtering through the curtain. She knew the road ahead would be full of thorns, but at least she and Hana had each other. And from now on, the truth would no longer be hidden behind the Whitman's polished walls. On Monday morning, Boise was shrouded in thick gray mist. Linda wrapped a wool scarf around her neck and gently closed the apartment door so Hana could sleep. Her daughter was still weak eyes, swollen from long bouts of crying, but at least she had allowed herself to rest through the night. Linda stepped out heavy-hearted. She needed groceries, a few small things to keep the home from feeling empty. The street was quiet save for the clatter of snowplows. Linda lowered her head and walked quickly when a short chirp from a patrol car sounded ahead. A uniformed figure stepped out, tall, solid, purposeful. He pulled off his glove and called out, "Ms. Parker." Linda started. It took a few seconds before she recognized Mark Johnson, the boy who had once sweated through taekwondo classes at her dojo. Now that boy was a police officer, his eyes bright but tempered by experience. "Mark? Goodness, how long has it been?" Linda stammered, a flicker of surprise breaking through her constant weariness. Mark smiled. The firm handshake returned the feeling of those old training sessions. "Over 15 years, ma'am. You still look as strong as ever." The words made Linda's throat tighten. She felt truly seen for the first time since the upheaval, not judged, but respected. They walked along the snow-covered sidewalk. Mark listened as Linda slowly recounted the scene at the Whitman's house on Christmas Eve. Her voice sometimes trembled, but her eyes burned unflinching. Mark was silent for a long time, then his hand curled into a fist. He said gravely that I've heard plenty of rumors about the Whitmans, but I didn't expect this. Ryan's father, Harold, was a judge. He's erased records more than once and forced victims into silence. People in the system know it, but few dare to touch them. Linda stopped heart-pounding. "So, if I take Hana to court, they'll try to strangle everything." Mark nodded, eyes wary. "Possibly. But you're not alone. If you need a statement, I'll testify. I saw your daughter that night with my own eyes. They won't dismiss it so easily." Something burst open in Linda's chest. She had been carrying everything alone so long she'd forgotten anyone might stand with her. Hearing him now, she felt a small flame kindle in the winter dark. They paused at a crossroads. A north wind hissed spinning flurries into the air. Mark pulled a card from his pocket and handed it to her. "Keep this. If they give you trouble, call me. Day or night, I'll be there." Linda gripped the card like a new weapon. She said nothing more, just nodded firmly. In the crow's feet around her eyes, a resolute light kindled. When Mark returned to his car, Linda watched until the patrol car disappeared. On the way home, her heart felt heavy, yet light, knowing the opponent was a whole machine light, because she and Hana were no longer utterly alone. Climbing the snow-dusted stairs, Linda opened the apartment door. Hana still slept, her breathing steadier. Linda sat by the bed, smoothing her daughter's hair, and whispered to herself, "My girl, we have an ally. This fight will be long, but I won't let anyone take your voice this time." Outside, snow fell quietly. Inside Linda, a small flame was truly lit. The Boise night was still. Wind hissed through a narrow window seam, making the small apartment shudder. Linda sat alone at the wooden table under a dim yellow lamp. Papers lay scattered before her remittance slips, hurried notes, a few old photos of Hana as a child. Each line of ink pricked at her memory. The wall clock neared midnight. Hana slept in the next room, her breathing calmer than in recent days. Linda lifted her head, her eyelids heavy, but her nerves taut. She gathered the papers about to stand when a faint sound came from the door, as if something had been pushed through the gap. Linda walked over. She saw a gray envelope lying quietly on the rug in the light spilling from the hallway. The edge was damp as if wet with melted snow. Her heart thudded. She picked it up, fingers trembling as she tore it open. Inside was a folded sheet. The ink smudged the handwriting messy. "Stay out of the Whitman family's business. If not, you'll end up exactly like your daughter." Linda went still. For a few seconds, all she could hear was blood pounding in her ears. Her hand crushed the paper without thinking. A threat. Open and direct. Aimed at Hana, the child she had sworn to protect. She drew a long breath and looked toward Hana's room. The door was ajar, and her daughter's shadow was faint on the wall, as fragile as mist. Linda turned back and set the letter on the table. Instead of panicking, her eyes sharpened. This was not her first time under pressure, but her anger never blazed so fiercely. She sat down and quietly opened her notebook. Linda added a line in the to-do column, "Preserve all evidence including threats." The pen dug into the paper, leaving an impression like an oath. She didn't sleep that night. Linda sat by Hana's bed, listening to her faint breaths. Worry pressed like a thick sheet of ice around her heart, but beneath it a flame burned. Each time she looked at Hana's pale face, Linda saw why she could not back down. When the first winter light crossed the window at dawn, Linda brewed coffee and studied the letter again. The paper was still damp, the ink blurred, but the threat was clear. She slipped it into a clear plastic sleeve, sealing it as carefully as evidence. That day, Linda met Mark at a small roadside diner. He came in, pulling off his knit cap alert at seeing the envelope on the table. Linda slid it to him. "They sent this last night. They know we won't stop." Mark turned it over, frowning deeply. "This handwriting is deliberately sloppy to avoid tracing, but it shows they're afraid. Keep it. I'll file a report to open a record. If they continue, we'll have legal grounds." Linda nodded. "I'm not afraid for myself. I'm so scared for Hana." Mark looked at her for a long moment, then said slowly, "If they try anything again, I swear I won't let it go. But you need to be ready. This fight won't only be in court. They'll try every way to squeeze you." Linda's fingers clenched until her knuckles went white. "I know, and I'm ready." She lifted her gaze and met Mark's steady eyes. In that instant, amid the diner's din, Linda felt a rare companionship, a quiet promise that she would not be alone on this road. Back at the apartment, Linda opened the door softly. Hana sat on the sofa, clutching a blanket and staring at the snowy window. When she saw her mother, she asked in a hoarse whisper, "Mom, will they leave me alone?" Linda came over and wrapped an arm around her shoulders. She didn't answer directly, only murmured, "Whatever they do, you won't be alone anymore. I'll always be here." In the dim afternoon light, Hana leaned against her mother's shoulder. The inner cracks hadn't healed, but a firm shoulder was now beside her. Late afternoon. Boise's sky sank beneath heavy clouds. A north wind slipped through alleys buried in snow. Linda sat in her small kitchen, an old landline phone before her. She had repeatedly stared at the numbers on a scrap of paper, yet her fingers still hesitated. At last, she drew a deep breath, lifted the receiver, and dialed. A gravelly, warm but world-weary male voice answered, James Miller speaking. "Who is this?" Linda smiled faintly, a mix of the strange and familiar. "It's me, Linda Parker. I wonder if you remember." A brief silence, then a dry chuckle. "The woman who argued with me for an hour to defend a student at a taekwondo tournament." How could I forget? Relief eased Linda's chest. She pictured the lawyer from years ago, salt and pepper hair glasses sliding down his nose, eyes that saw through you yet held kindness. He had supported the tournaments, a not-quite friend, but someone she could trust now. "James, I need help. It's about Hana, my daughter." Her voice wavered but soon steadied. Linda recounted everything from Christmas Eve to Hana's losses and the chilling threat the previous night. James stayed silent. The only sounds were the rustle of paper and a sigh. When she finished, he spoke gravely. "Linda, understand this opponent is unlike any you've faced. The Whitmans have money connections and a knack for bending the law. If we file suit, they'll attack your daughter's weak points, smear her, deny everything, even fabricate testimony." Linda closed her eyes, her voice turning steely. "Whatever it takes, I won't let them keep hurting her. If I have to fight, I'll fight to the end." A long beat of silence. Then he exhaled. "All right, I'll stand with you both. But we need more than resolve solid evidence and witnesses. You alone won't be enough." Linda thought of Mark, the old student's steady nod that morning. A spark of hope rose. "I have a witness, a police officer." He saw Hana that night. "Even better," James said firmly. "I'll need medical records, every receipt you kept, and any messages or letters proving the abuse. I'll prepare to file as soon as possible." Linda nodded, though he couldn't see it. "I'll get everything ready." When she hung up, the room fell quiet again. Linda sat a long while, heavy yet light-heavy, because the road ahead was full of traps, light because she was no longer alone. Outside, the wind howled along the eaves. Hana opened her door with a thin frame and a steaming cup in hand. "Mom, who were you talking to?" Linda stepped over, took the cup and smiled gently. "An old friend. Someone who will help us." Hana hesitated, eyes red but tinged with curiosity. Linda set a hand on her shoulder, voice steady. "Don't worry, everything will come to light." A tremor passed through Hana's gaze, as if she didn't dare believe in a future. But for the first time, Linda saw a thin, flickering light breaking through the long darkness. As Linda sorted stacks of papers that night, a new firmness settled in her. The threatening letter remained sealed in its plastic sleeve, not a source of fear but a puzzle piece in the file, a shard of truth. The old mother decided in that small room, amid the winter cold, the real battle had begun. In the morning in downtown Boise, light snow drifts down, and the street before the office building is layered in white. Linda gripped Hana's hand and led her inside. James Miller's law office was on the second floor of an old brick building. The sign was modest, the silver letters faded with time, but behind the wooden door lay their hope. The hallway was quiet, only their footsteps echoing. When James came out to greet them, he looked as familiar as ever, a slightly rumpled gray suit glasses slipping down his nose, but eyes calm and steady. "You're both here good. Come in," he said, opening the office door wide. The room was small, the wooden desk buried under files, bookcases, packed with worn law volumes. A swivel chair sat opposite the client chairs. Hana stopped short, eyes full of anxiety, as if this room were a stage where she had to bear all her pain. Linda gently squeezed her hand to show she was right there. James sat, voice even. "Hana, there's no jury and no judge today. It's just us. But I need the truth in your own voice. That's the first step." Hana bowed her head, fingers nervously picking at her sweater hem. Her lips moved, but no sound came. Linda laid her calloused hand over her daughter's and whispered, "You don't have to be afraid. Speak so that we can protect you." A long silence. Then Hana took a sharp breath, her voice as small as a draft through a door crack. "I lost 4 babies. Each time I was alone. Ryan, he never came in, only stood outside. Evelyn said I was a burden, a barren tree." Hana's voice broke, her eyes blurred with tears. James didn't interrupt. He took notes, slowly nodding now and then. When she fell silent, he looked up, not pitying but respectful. "Thank you, Hana. This matters. I need you to continue how they treated you daily the times you were neglected, any words that prove their contempt." Linda sat beside her, heart clenched. Every word Hana uttered was a cut. She described cold dinners when Ryan deliberately came home late, times Evelyn forced her to scrub floors on her knees just after the pain of another loss. The sneers you live off us. Hannah's shoulders shook. Tears splashed onto James's notes. Linda wrapped her arms around her, letting her cry like a child. In that moment, she knew this was the first time Hana had truly shed the heavy silence of years. James closed the file, voice firm. I'll compile this into a formal statement, but Linda, be warned, the other side will counter and try to break this apart. We need witnesses outside the family. Fortunately, you have Mark. I'll arrange to take his testimony. Linda nodded. Hana still pressed against her mother's shoulder, eyes swollen but breathing easier. Being heard and recorded had eased part of the burden. Before they left, James stood and looked straight at Hana. They want to make you weak and voiceless. Today you proved the opposite. Don't forget, truth is your greatest strength. Hana didn't answer, only nodded slightly. But Linda could see the thinnest ray of light in those tear-wet eyes, like a sprout breaking through cold soil. They stepped out into the winter wind, but the day seemed brighter to Linda. She squeezed her daughter's hand and whispered, You've begun, Hana. There's no going back now. Late afternoon, Boise was bathed in the pale gold of a setting sun. Linda met Mark in a small cafe on the corner of Franklin. The place was quiet. The scent of roasted coffee mingled with pastries, warm and comforting. Linda sat by the window, slowly turning the hot cup to warm her hands. The door opened. Mark came in. Out of uniform, he wore a dark sweater, his stride steady. Seeing Linda, he gave a rare smile that softened the tension he usually carried. Have you been waiting long? He asked, pulling out a chair. Linda shook her head. Her eyes lingered on the face of the former student, now grown, bearing a weathered look she hadn't seen before. Mark. Thank you. Hana. She's fragile, but knowing someone is willing to testify has given her a bit of faith. Mark was quiet, nodding slightly. He laced his fingers on the table, lowered his voice. Ms. Linda, you need to understand. This isn't just risky for your family. Whitman is a name many people fear. They're used to using money and connections to block every path. If I step up, I'll also become a thorn in their side. Linda met his eyes, voice firm. You can back out if you want. I won't blame you. But my daughter, she can't keep silent. Mark looked up, his gaze suddenly bright. No, I won't back out. You taught me at 15 that on the mat, if you fall, you get up. Now it's my turn to stand with you. I'll state what I saw on Christmas Eve. Hana huddled on the porch while they raised their glasses inside. Linda felt a sting at the bridge of her nose. She hadn't expected lessons from years ago to turn into strength at this moment. After a pause, Mark continued heavier. I have to tell you something. Years ago, I witnessed a traffic accident. The driver at fault was Ryan. The initial report clearly blamed him, but overnight the file vanished. The injured party had to keep quiet and Ryan walked free. I believe Harold, his father, wiped it clean. Linda's heart tightened. The pieces sharpened into focus. The Whitmans' cruelty extended beyond their home, reaching into the legal system. She said slowly, The more I learn, the more certain I am that I can't retreat. They've lived off other people's silence for too long. Mark nodded. I'll gather what I can. I won't promise it'll be easy, but my testimony will crack their wall. And if needed, I'll take the stand. The light outside faded. Shadows crept into the cafe. Linda looked at his face and felt warmth in her chest. For the first time in years, she wasn't only a mother carrying a burden, she had a faithful ally willing to risk career and safety to defend the truth. They left together, walking along the snow-covered sidewalk. He saw her to her door, then stopped. Before turning away, Mark said softly, Remember, you're not walking alone. Linda watched him disappear. When she stepped inside, Hana was on the sofa, blanket in her arms, looking out the window. Linda came near and laid a hand on her shoulder. Hana looked up, still tired but expectant. Linda whispered, My girl, we just received another promise, and this time I believe it's real. On a dense gray afternoon, a cold wind clawed at the window panes as Linda and Hana sat in James Miller's office. The room, already small, felt crowded with stacks of documents and the yellow pool of a desk lamp. James set a thick file before them, his voice slow but firm. "This is the first step. If we sue the Whitmans, we need evidence with real weight, not just accounts of what happened." Linda straightened eyes, taut with resolve. "I've brought all the receipts and copies of the years of transfers. See if it's enough." James opened his glasses and flipped through the pages Linda had carefully clipped into a transparent binder. Scrawled notes, "Buy supplements," "Fix the roof before winter," appeared as silent proof of a mother's love. He nodded. "This is a good start. It shows you never abandoned Hana. You covered for her husband. But we need more Hana's medical records confirmations of each miscarriage and, crucially, a doctor's testimony." Hana sat beside them, hands entwined and trembling. She lowered her head, voice catching the doctor. "Told me to rest, but Ryan always made me host guests, keep serving. I couldn't carry to term. Because of that, too." James looked at her for a long moment, equal parts compassion and encouragement. "If you agree, I'll contact the hospital. They have the records. If the doctor is willing to testify, that will be powerful." Hana hesitated, then nodded slightly. Linda set a hand on her back, feeling her ragged breathing slow. James closed the folder, pulled a blank sheet, and jotted bullet points. "We prepare on 3 fronts. 1 financial evidence, all support from Ms. Linda. 2 medical evidence, miscarriage records, and Hana's psychological assessments. 3 witnesses, Mark, and possibly the doctor. If we can find anyone who worked for the Whitmans and saw how they treated her, even better." Linda listened closely, tension rising with determination. She understood this was no longer about feelings, a real battle where every gap could be turned against them. James added carefully, "The Whitmans will counter hard. They can hire the best counsel and bend arguments. But we have one advantage: public opinion. If this goes public, pressure will build. The question is, Hana, are you willing to bear that, willing to let your story be discussed?" Silence. Hana raised her head, eyes still red but no longer evasive. "I've been silent too long. If the truth must be shown, I will face it." Linda squeezed her hand, tears bright but lips pressed tight to keep from crying. In that moment she saw in Hana a light she had feared was gone for good. James nodded, decisive. "Good. I'll file within 2 weeks. In the meantime, be ready. They'll threaten, smear, even try to buy people off. Don't let it shake you. I'll go the distance with you." The meeting ended. Cold wind rushed down the hallway when they stepped out, but Linda's chest felt lighter. She put an arm around Hana and murmured, "See, we have a plan now. No one can silence you any longer." Hana leaned on her shoulder, eyes closed. In a city buried in snow, 2 small figures warmed each other with a newly kindled faith. A gray January morning cast Boise in leaden tones. Outside the county courthouse, snow rose halfway up the calves. Clusters of people huddled together, breath steaming white. Linda gripped Hana's hand and climbed the icy steps. Her heart pounded, but her stride did not falter. Inside, the hallway was broad with high ceilings. Cold, fluorescent light washed over solemn faces. Hana tucked herself behind her mother, fingers clenched on her coat hem. Linda bent and whispered, "You're not alone. Remember." The courtroom doors opened. The smell of old wood and paper made the air feel even tighter. James Miller sat at the plaintiff's table with a thick file before him. Linda helped Hana into a seat. Across the aisle, the Whitmans were already in place. Ryan wore a gray suit and tight tie, reclining with easy confidence. In a white fur coat and deep red lipstick, Evelyn held her head high as if this were a tea party. Harold, the longtime judge, sat rigid, eyes like ice, while Ryan's sister Abigail leaned over to whisper, a smirk curling her lips. When the judge entered, everyone rose. Proceedings began. James opened with a steady baritone. "Your Honor, my client, Hana Parker, endured neglect and psychological abuse at the hands of her husband and his family. We will present financial records, medical evidence, and witness testimony today." Linda glanced at Hana. Her daughter's eyes were tight with tension, breaths short. Linda squeezed her hand, passing a little warmth. The Whitman's attorney, a young man with slicked hair, stood. His voice rang clear and cutting. The plaintiff has fabricated this story. The Whitman family provided housing care and financial support. Ms. Parker contributed nothing and failed in her marital duties. The supposed psychological symptoms are exaggerated for pity. Murmurs swept through the room. Linda clenched her teeth, her hands balling into fists. The first witness, Mark Johnson, took the stand, back straight, eyes resolute. Under oath, his voice was even as he described Christmas Eve, Hana shivering on the porch while inside they raised their glasses and laughed. As a police officer, I was on site. I saw it with my own eyes. No one opened the door for her. No one cared. That is the truth. The defense sprang up. The witness has a prior personal connection to the plaintiff's family. His testimony lacks objectivity. Mark stared straight ahead, voice unwavering. I'm her mother's former student, but I swear on my badge what I'm saying is true. I gain nothing from this. Whispers rippled through the gallery. Pride and pain tightened in Linda's chest. When Hana took the stand, the room went still. She strolled small as if she might vanish. But when her eyes met her mother's, she paused, drew a deep breath and spoke shaky but clear. I lost 4 children in that house. I screamed for help, but no one listened. They called me useless, and they left me in the snow on Christmas Eve like a stranger. Her voice broke. Tears fell. No one laughed. Even the judge's brow creased. Across the aisle, Ryan turned away, lips pressed thin. Evelyn frowned. Harold kept his icy look, but the hand on his knee tightened. Day 1 ended under a heavy cloud. In the hallway, Hana nearly collapsed. Linda held her, feeling her daughter's shoulders tremble. You did it, Linda whispered, eyes wet. Whatever comes, you stood up today. Beyond the glass, snow still fell thickly, but in Linda's heart she knew a crack had begun to form in the Whitman's wall of power. On the final morning of hearings, Boise's sky hung like a sheet of lead. The courthouse corridors were packed. Footsteps rang off the tiles. Linda guided Hana through the crowd, heart clenched. Her thin, exhausted daughter walked until she reached the plaintiff's bench. On the dais, the judge appeared, face impassive, voice, even as he reviewed the last formalities. The air was so taut that a single cough echoed like thunder. James sat beside Linda, fingers clasped, eyes fixed ahead. Across the aisle, Ryan wore an easy, arrogant calm. Evelyn sat beside him, dark red lips tilted in a faint smile, while Harold, the former judge, rested a hand on his cane, as if he already knew the winner. The gavel struck. The judge began to read. The court grants the petition for divorce by the plaintiff, Hana Parker, from the defendant, Ryan Whitman. A brief breath of relief escaped Linda's chest. She squeezed Hana's hand and nodded as if to say, "At least you're free of the marriage." Then the following words fell like hammer blows regarding the allegations of psychological abuse and neglect due to a lack of direct legal evidence and corroborating witnesses. The court cannot sustain the claim. As for the division of assets, given the defendant's greater financial contribution, the majority of marital property is awarded to Ryan Whitman. The room went dead quiet. Hana stared blankly. Her hands shook so hard the papers slid from her lap. Linda was stunned, her whole body ice cold as if drenched in a bucket of water. She turned to James. The old lawyer lowered his head, eyes dark, jaw set, without a word. Across the aisle, Ryan leaned back with a satisfied smile. Evelyn whispered in his ear, and Harold nodded slowly as if to confirm everything remained in their grasp. Hana broke into sobs, face buried in her hands. The strangled sound tore at Linda's chest. She wrapped her daughter in her arms, shaking her head, whispering through trembling lips, "No, this isn't the end." But Hana seemed not to hear. Hopelessness drained the strength from her, as if every drop of life had been drawn out. Holding her daughter, Linda looked up toward the bench. Fury flared in her eyes, a fire she forced down so it wouldn't erupt into a scream in open court. When the session ended, people drifted out, leaving the corridor lit in patchy pools. Ryan strode past Linda and paused, leaning close, his breath sour with wine. "See, the law is on our side. Go home and live out your old age in that cramped apartment." Linda clenched her fists until her nails cut her palms and drew blood. She didn't answer, only met his gaze, her eyes smoldering. Outside the courthouse, heavy snow fell. Hana sank onto the steps, shoulders shaking. Linda sat beside her and wrapped an arm around her, shielding her from the bitter wind. Amid the noisy crowd, there were two small silhouettes, but Linda knew another path had opened in this moment of despair. Today's verdict was unjust, a temporary defeat. But in a mother's heart, she swore the fight was far from over.